Hey guys, today we are going to implement an accessible dialog or modal. We use modals everywhere on our websites and in our applications when we want to warn a user about something or ask user if he is sure about what he is doing right now. Usually it is a window overlaid on either the primary window or another dialog window. The important part here is to understand that everything that is under dialog should be inactive when the dialog itself is open. It means that user shouldn't be able to interact with content outside an active dialog window. Typically, everything that is outside dialog window, it is usually visually dimmed. Visually, user understands that he cannot interact with everything that is outside. For the users that they don't see, for example, or when they use screen readers, they should be also informed in a proper way in order to understand that they are currently inside some model. And some implementations also follow to that when user, for example, clicks outside the dialog, then the dialog is closed. So we are going to use modal dialog example. It's going to be a dialog or modal that has form. It has also add and cancel button. So we are going to implement something similar to that. Also, important part and maybe a tricky part, it is that when you open dialog, you need to focus, for example, first focusable element inside this dialog, also kind of trap user inside it. So it means when you try to go with tab through all the fields or focusable elements, then you can't go outside the dialog. In order to go outside, you need to click escape, for example. So let's begin. We are going to create accessible modal component, and there we are going to implement button that is going to be clicked and it is going to open the dialog. Let's give it an ID. Later we are going to add on-click. And actually I think that's pretty it. So we can already implement on-click on this button because everything it's going to do is going only to open dialog. For that we are going to work with state and we are going to use, for example, is modal open, set is modal open, and in the beginning it's going to be false. So let's create a function. Let's call it actually toggle modal. And here we're just going to do set is modal open and we're going to work with pref state and we'll do just not pref state. Also we are going to do prevent default so that anything that also is connected to, in order not to have any errors or problems when we are going also to implement keyboard navigation. So here we are going to use toggle modal and here we will just write open modal, for example. I already implemented CSS, that's why you can find it on my GitHub. I will link it in description. We are going to create a div and we will give it a class name of modal overlay. And then we are going to check if it is open. And when yes, then we are going also to add class open. And then we are going to implement our div that is actually a dialog container. We are going to give it ID. And inside we are going to have heading 1, because you need to follow hierarchy of headings according to accessibility. And it is thought that when you open Modal, it's kind of accepted that it is kind of a new window. So it means that it should have heading 1. And we will write something like fill out your address. For example. And it's going to have also ID. And inside we are going to have form. This form is going to have a class name of form. And we want to prevent on submit, because we want to implement it on our own. That's why we are going to do prevent default. Inside form we are going to have label and write, for example, address. I'm going to give it an ID. And we are going to connect it for later with our input. Let's leave it for now. And we are going to add here input. This input is going also to have an ID. We are going at once connect it with our label. It's going to be type text. We are going to say that it should have max length, for example, of 50. And that's it. We are going to use also state in order to control our input and to see what user is typing. So we are going to create address. And in the beginning it's going to be empty string. So we are going to use it as a value in input. And we are going to create a handler to control the value. So for example, let's create handle change. And we'll just set address as a event target value, and we'll use it here. Also, we are going to create a container for buttons and div, and we are going to give it a class name of btn container. And here we are going to create two buttons, cancel and save. So button 1, we're going to give it a class name of UI icon button send. We are going to give it a name send. We are going to implement on click a little bit later. And later we will implement also on key down, but maybe on the whole model. And we are going to write here send. And another button. That is going to have class name of UI icon button cancel. It's going to have name of cancel. And and later we'll implement on click. And it's going to say cancel. Let's implement cancel. We are going to do event prevent default. Then we are going to close model. And we are going to set address to empty string as it was in the beginning. Generally, we are going to do the same actually for our send button, because we are not sending anywhere everything that user created. It is just for presentation purposes. That's why we are going to use both these handlers on both our buttons. Now let's have a look at our pattern and see what areas we should implement. So here we see that it should have row dialog. It is going to identify this div container as a dialog, and it's going to also to inform users that don't see that it is a dialog. We are going also to add area labeled by, because we have heading. That's why we can say what this dialog is about. We don't have any description, that's why area described by is not relevant. And we are going to add ARIA model true. That's it actually, what is connected to ARIA, so kind of pretty easy. So let's do it. We are going, as I said, say row dialog. We are going to give ARIA labeled by and copy this ID. And we are going to say ARIA model true. That's it. Now the hardest part. Let's see how to implement key down. So as a whole, we can try and implement on key down on our div, because some lints might throw an error after that, or warning saying that you can't implement on key down on div. In order not to receive any warnings from linter, for example, you can use tab index 0. And then we can implement const handle key down. And we are going to implement it on the model. So let's see now what we actually need to implement there. So you see that keyboard support is actually pretty short. It should have tab implementation, which just moves focus as usually between focusable elements. The point is that focus stays always inside this dialog. Shift plus tab is the same, but the other direction, and escape should close the dialog. That's it. So let's implement it. We are going to check if E key is tab. Then we are going to check if also shift key was pressed, and then we are going to check what is the current element of the current active element of the document. Active element. And we are going to add few refs. First of all, we are going to create an input ref, because in our form it is the first. It is the first element that should be focusable. It means that when we press shift with tab, the focus should go to the last element and not outside the dialog. That's why we need it. So we are going to check if it equals input ref current, and when it does, we are doing prevent default, and then we are, by our own hands, we are going to focus the elements that we need to be focused. In our case, it's going to be the cancel button. So let's create another ref. We are going to call it, for example, cancel btn ref, use ref, and then we are going to say that cancel btn ref current and focus. That's it. Now let's use these refs. So we are going to give to our input ref, and we are going to give to our cancel button ref. You can do the same focusing just using JavaScript and finding HTML elements that you need using IDs. So you kind of, for example, do get element by ID and then just focus it. It's kind of the same, but I decided this time I'm going to show you this with React hook use ref. Now we are going to check else. So it means that no shift key pressed. And then we are going to do actually almost the same, which means, but this time we are going to check if active element is cancel btn. And when it is, then we do the same, we prevent default. And then we, in the opposite, we focus our input. That's it. Let's also do return so that we don't continue. And then we can check if it is an escape button. Key. And when it is, then what we do, we set is modal open to false. We set address to initial value. So as a whole, in general, you can do everything that you need to do in cancel handler, but here it is always also important. That's, by the way, how you can do, I'm going to show you how you can focus HTML element using get element by ID. And here we need to find dialog btn. We just set check just in case, and then we focus it. So that's how you do it. One more thing that I forgot to do, when you open Modal, you also need to put focus on the first focusable element that is located inside Modal. And for that, we can use, for example, use effect in our case. We will do it only on mount, but sometimes models, they are already rendered, that it can be tricky. That's why we are going to use isModalOpen as a dependency. And we are going to check if, for example, input ref and isModalOpen. And we are going to focus input. We are going to add here also input ref as a dependency. So I went to test it, and not everything worked as it should, and I spent some time debugging why. So I eventually found out that I made a typo, and else should have been to the if, checking that if it is a shift key, but I made a mistake and wrote it here, so that's why it didn't work as it should have. But now it works properly. Let's see what we have. So that's my demo. It doesn't look really beautiful, so don't pay attention to it. So we are going to open Modal. When I click enter, I'm opening it, and you can see that the first focusable element is focused. Then I press tab, I go to the next focusable element, which is send button. Then I press tab, I go to cancel, and when I press tab again, I am back to input. The same happens when I press, for example, now shift and tab, I go back to cancel. And when I press escape, I just close the model. So that's it. I hope that this video is going to help you follow for more accessibility tips. Cheers!